Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight on THEOSOPHIA Esoteric Studies, I'm proud to bring you Lynne Salomon Miceli of Edgar Cayce's New York City ARE. Greetings and welcome, Lynne.
Thank you. Thank you, Hercules. My guest tonight is Catharine Allan, psychic, medium, and author of Divination Rules, 100 Tips for Flawless Fortune Telling. Welcome, Catharine.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Lynn.
Nice to see you. Catharine Allan has studied sound healing, chakra cleansing. This is quite a list. Reiki, gemstone healing, spiritual cleansing, and Bach flower remedies, all in the service of her international clientele who benefit from her skill and her strong healing energies. Her 33 years of experience as a medium, healer, and tarot card reader have provided her a deep knowledge that is strengthened by her naturally powerful intuition. Catharine is a sought-after medium. She also broadcasts a weekly radio show, the River Rain Show, River Rain. She has also been recently featured on the program On with Rhonda on Jewel Radio, which I didn't even know existed. So I learned something from this, Catharine.
It doesn't exist anymore, actually. No, I know it's an old bio, but it was great while it lasted.
Well, it was apparently a radio that you accessed through Pandora, or at least that's what I seem to find. In any case, Catharine lives in Quebec, Canada, and she's the author of 3 books: A Little Bit of Intuition, An Introduction to Extrasensory Perception, Vibes from the Other Side, Accessing Your Spirit Guides and Other Beings from the Beyond, and her latest, the book we're going to be talking about, Divination Rules, 100 Tips for Flawless Fortune Telling. But before we talk about the book, Catharine, I've heard you say that you are self-taught as a psychic and a medium. So how do you do that? How did you teach yourself, and how did you start? Did you have psychic experiences as a child?
Yeah, I don't think I knew that they were, but I was always able to know what people were actually feeling, even if they wouldn't admit it. And I was always told I was too sensitive and all that stuff. I I could see through a lot of situations, and then I would argue endlessly with my mother about stuff. And then by the time I got to high school, I was able to predict things, but that's just the people around me. I had no idea this was any kind of intuitive gift. I just, it's just who I was, and I wasn't fitting in with it. It was more when I got to study astrology over, the course of, well, I started in high school in secret, and I just started studying it and observing everyone around me, and I felt like it kept showing up to be accurate. So I kept going. And then it wasn't until really I went to Montreal that I met some mentors along the way. And one of them was, a boyfriend that introduced me to the tarot, and I just never put it down again. And he also brought me to this metaphysical shop that I ended up working in for 15 years, a few years later. And he also wanted me to meet his friend Miriam, who he said, "Oh, you've got to meet her. She does astrology. She does art like you. You've got to meet her." And he was working at a 24-hour kind of 7-Eleven style place in the middle of the night. And he dragged me over there at 3 in the morning or something to meet Miriam. And she was too busy baking, but I got to see her face. And then literally like 2 or 3 weeks later, I stepped out my back balcony, and Miriam was my next door neighbor. And I had no idea. And so she mentored me in all kinds of stuff, including the astrology. But the intuitive abilities, that was just me being obsessed with like what I was sensing and feeling and trying to make sense of it all, and trying to, like getting feelings that were visions about things, and then observing whether they were true or not, studying human nature as much as I could. But yeah, starting to do tarot reading is when it began. And then I worked at a psychic hotline back in the day. That was crazy. But anyway, she brought a room full of like 40 mediums together to do her psychic hotline. And one of those people became an inadvertent mentor as well. because he was already very clairvoyant. He was Métis, so he was part French, part Mohawk, and he was younger than me, but he was already just so open. And so when we would read for each other, he encouraged me to just say whatever was coming to me, even if it sounded crazy. And I felt safe with him, so I did, and it turned out to be accurate. And then I learned what clairvoyance was, because he validated some of the things that I never would have uttered otherwise. I think that's how it is for a lot of people, really. Clairaudience came when I was doing readings at this metaphysical shop, and over time I realized, yeah, why do I keep hearing things and feeling naturally to say, well, they're saying, what do you mean they're saying? Who am I talking to here exactly? So I didn't go seeking this at all. I just was doing readings and trying to help people and studying and trying to go deeper all the time. And then these things just, even channeling states, they just happened. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't trying to do it. And mediumship as well. That came spontaneously, because over the course of all these hundreds of readings, I would describe who I saw and I would look up and the person would tell me they passed. And then I was like, what is going on? And it took my colleagues over there. I said, well, you're a medium. I'm like, well, what's that? So I really, that's probably why I trust it, because I never went craving it. And nobody gave me like a prescribed way or method or what's right or wrong. It's really been the Wild West in my own mind, and learning, and validating it through other people and other readings. Yeah.
But when you use that phrase, you said they're saying. I've heard other mediums say that when they're giving a reading, or other readers when they're answering a question, they'll say they're saying. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're apparently there.
Yeah.
So you're the book is called Divination Rules, and the write-up about the book says that it's part of the Rules series. What is that?
Yeah, I was told that when they asked me to write the book, but I never really looked it up until recently. But there's other books called like Self-Care Rules. Another one is House Rules, like how to be comfortable in your home. So it's a series published by Sterling Ethos, which is like a division of Barnes and Noble in New York. So the little bit of book that I wrote was also a series of, I don't know how many, maybe 25 to 30 books that were a little bit of something. And so the Rules it's another series they put on.
That was a little bit of intuition.
Yeah. Vibes from the Other Side was my own thing. I pitched it to them, and there was no series involved, but the other two are series. Yeah.
And so it's a very pretty book. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thank you for showing it. It's a very pretty book. And
Yeah.
inside each of the tips is about a page or a page and a half, and there's a little illustration on every other page.
Yeah.
In some ways, it reminds me of a children's book, but that for me is a good thing. I really love children's literature, so that I like that about it.
Yeah, it's true. I think I mean, I never read their philosophy before they asked me to start writing, but it seems like from the, book number 3, they distribute all over the world. And I think they want, a sort of like educational take on things that's not watered down completely, but it's accessible to most people, so the visuals is a big part of things. All the books they do are very well done. Like the covers are beautiful. There's illustrations and everything. And people tell me they put them up on display on their shelves because they like how they look. So yeah, if it makes this stuff safer and people are gonna actually pick it up and absorb it because it looks a little more, friendly, that makes me happy. It's just about getting the message out.
Are the other books in the series, the Rules series, are they all sort of metaphysical or not?
No, I think they're across the board. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't looked up the whole list. I'm not sure how many exist in them. Yeah. I'll have to do that after this.
One of the first tips in the book is a statement about the importance of carefully choosing your words when speaking to people about issues that might be sensitive for them, or talking to people who might be in very emotional states. And
Yeah.
and yet you also say that it's possible to be honest while at the same time being really careful about choosing your words. It seems to me, I think that's a statement that would be appropriate in any counseling psychology course. But it's really
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
If you
Sorry,
would
go
you be
ahead.
able to find that and read that, because it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I have it here. So it's number 3. Be mindful of the language you use when interpreting divination messages. Words really do matter. If you're asked a question about someone's love life and they are vulnerable and wanting to know what their partner truly feels about them, be very careful when it comes to the tone of your voice, the tone of voice you use and the words you choose. You never know what someone's mental or emotional state might be, so it's important to be tactful and sensitive. Love or lack of it can push us to extremes at times, and this is usually when we come to divination for answers. Generally, if we're given advice or a prediction of what is to come, many of us will remember it and even obsess about it. If your words will resound in someone's mind for years to come, you will want those words to be kind, positive, constructive, and empowering. This doesn't mean that you have to sugarcoat things. There are ways to be honest and kind. It's also important to remember that divination answers are like mantras or spells in and of themselves. A symbol you see in a dream can mean one thing in one book and something else in another. Interpretation and translations of texts can shift the way they are perceived and heard, so be aware of your language and tone. Above all, people will always remember how you made them feel.
They'll always remember how you made them feel. Now that, almost all of that could be in a book for counseling psychology students.
Yes, yes, it could.
Except for the little bit that actually mentions divination, it all applies. And actually, it's a very concise. I took a course in counseling psychology. I have a degree
yeah.
in counseling psychology.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't
No.
think they ever said that as clearly to me as you said that in the book. So
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's a
I've been
compliment.
impressed by
Wow.
that.
So
Another one
you
of
must
your,
agree then, you know, if you've taken counseling psychology, you must have had a lot more training on that. I think a lot of people would benefit in these arts from taking some training on communications.
did you ever have any training in counseling, or?
I've done enough therapy. I've read enough self-help books. You know, I deep dive into it on my own, but not an official course. No.
Well, you really got the gist of it there, I thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Another one of your tips has to do with cultural appropriation.
Mm-hmm. I
That
don't
was,
remember where that one is in the book, unfortunately.
it's one of the first few.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we don't need to read it, but you could talk about it, because I thought that
Yeah,
was
for sure. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, it's a tough subject, I find, because on one hand, you have people that are finally opening up, and perhaps the first thing that they feel attracted to that helps them open on their spiritual path is something not from their culture. You know, even myself, I'm talking about chakras. I'm not Hindu. I didn't grow up in India. You know, I'm talking about, you know, I'm burning sage. I'm not First Nations. And so it's really tricky for using these practices respectfully. And I don't know. It's hard to even weigh in to say, well, should you use them at all if they're not your culture? I sort of feel, well, not 100% that's true, because there are people out there that do learn and do study and respect the people that culture that they're using it from. It's when you start seeing people at festivals, perhaps, you know, donning like First Nations feather regalia or something, and it's like that's dressing up in a costume to you. That's not really understanding the context. Or
Can I just
yeah, sure.
say that for some of our audience in Canada, you use the term First Nations. We don't
Oh,
use
yes.
in the US. I like that term. In the US, we say Native American, which is actually not accurate because Native means born there.
Yeah.
Indigenous would be more accurate. But anyway, I think
Yeah.
First Nations is a very nice term. Anyway, go on.
I like it
want
too,
people
yeah.
to know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us, even if you use, well, certain tarot decks are a conglomeration of cultures as well. If you look at the Rider-Waite and the Thoth deck and the Golden Dawn, I mean, this is Egyptian based a lot of the time, and these guys were not Egyptian.
Right.
You know, some of the symbolism or the Kabbalah that we're using or that it's incorporated in things, we're not, if you know, if you didn't study under a rabbi, is it okay if you start using Kabbalah? Like Madonna had her phase where she was into that and everybody was just jumping on a trend without understanding what it is. And I mean, on one, that's why I say I'm torn, because people do have to learn, and they, you know, we can't all just be instant experts. So it's sort of like, well, if you're taking on learning something that isn't of your own culture, you should go very carefully and make sure you learn and speak to people in that culture before you start using it to counsel people or you know, posting or grandstanding about it. So
For teaching it or presenting yourself
or
as
teach, yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, definitely. And then the other thing too is like, even if you haven't, let's say, been initiated by somebody of that culture, you can still have done, I think there's plenty of people that do their diligence and study things that aren't, and they've had some maybe years of personal experience, and they know how to frame it so that it doesn't have this tone of disrespect towards the source, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've always been a little like you, a little confused about cultural appropriation because on the one hand, it does seem wrong and actually kind of ridiculous for people to be presenting like for people to be presenting themselves as Native American shamans or something when
Yeah,
they were born in Brooklyn and their background is Polish or whatever. But
yeah,
on the
yeah,
other hand, um, I think as long as human beings have existed, like when the first tribe of Neanderthals ran into the first tribe of Homo sapiens, they probably noticed that like this tribe was better at this and that tribe was better at that, and they thought, wow, we could do that. Maybe we could, that would be an improvement. Every time cultures meet, there's kind of an exchange, and
hmm,
I don't see how you can really stop that. So yeah,
yeah, exactly. There is like a, I don't know, I'm not sure if you call it a prophecy or not, but of that they call the Rainbow Warriors within the First Nations. And that is sort of saying that people of many different colors will come together to preserve the old traditions. And there's rainbow gatherings that happen all over North America where they go into the woods and pretty much live off the land, and they meet and make relationships with indigenous people and try to adopt their practices in a respectful way. So I mean, yeah, that's why it's such a tricky subject.
it
Yeah.
is tricky. It is tricky, but I thought it was interesting that you actually dealt with it, and
Mm.
also that you said that if you can find or learn the divination practices from your own culture, that can be very, of your own ancestors, that can be very
Yes.
powerful.
Yeah, well, for a while when people were challenging me the most, about, let's say, I learned to burn the sage from my mentor, who I told you was part Mohawk, you know. So I sort of felt that was okay. He initiated me. But then sometimes when people, they don't know you and they see me burning sage and they're like, why are you doing that? And, it's not yours. And so then I had to really think about it. And I went searching, and the practice of they call it smudging, but other let's say Scottish, that's my heritage, Scottish English, they called it seining. And they would burn they wouldn't burn sage because that wasn't native to there, but they would burn juniper. And they still had, you know, those practices, I believe, either at Samhain, Halloween, you know, or New Year's, they would burn the smoke and smoke the house and let it out the back. And that was supposed to, you know, cleanse the spirits. And so these kind of burning practices are all over the world. So, you know, is it so horrible to adopt the one of the, you know, the continent we're in? I don't know, because then you go into this thing of like, well, you also want to use what's around you, not like importing tons of Palo Santo from another country. You know, you're using what's native to you. And there it is. There's the white sage or whatever. So again, like lots of ethical things to talk about within this. But I wanted to bring up ethics in the book because I don't find anybody writes about ethics. And especially right now that anybody can just take a weekend workshop and have way better computer skills than a lot of us, and they can present themselves as anything they want. And I really thought it was important to include ethics in it.
Yes, I was impressed by that. It's very professional. Do you want to speak more about the ethical aspects of it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, the very first one that I have is the basic consent. You know, and it's crazy to me in this day and age, we're still like having trouble with understanding consent, but here we are. And I think sometimes it's the way things are presented in you know, movies or Hollywood or Netflix shows or whatever, and they're highly edited and they want to make it look magical, and but they present things in a way that you know, they're presenting, I guess, the height of what this could be, but they're giving an illusion, and then that to me sort of bypasses consent. Like, for example, if we think of the Long Island medium, Teresa Saputo, and her style of show, like I've told people, would you really want me coming up to you in the grocery store and out of nowhere just tell you at the cash, oh, by the way, like your uncle's around you, you know, and he's saying this, or like I don't want somebody doing that to me when I'm out in my, who knows what mood I'm in or what's on my mind. I'm preoccupied with errands, and somebody would just sort of like bust in and not ask me and give me a spiritual message. It's very invasive, even if it's accurate. So I tell people, like, I'm sure she's getting permissions and not just walking up to people randomly, you know, and we don't know how much has gone into that before she does that. But yes, that's like, it makes it seem like those kind of shows could set a tone to make it seem like it's just fine to walk up to anybody and say whatever you think, or you start using your cards and whatever it is, your whatever tools, and you're excited and you think it's fine to just go up and say whatever's coming to your head, you know, and you know, we all start there naively at some point, but you quickly, if you're empathic, you quickly realize, oh crap, that didn't land very well, did it? Or this person's upset now, or no, I don't know what that means. And they're stuck going, well, what's that mean? So that you know, you have to really ask permission before you do it. The person has to be psychologically, emotionally ready. And you also have to be ready to like dive in and receive how they feel, or help them make sense of it.
Well, have you had that situation where you've been out and about and you've had a perception about somebody that you had the impulse to share? How
I'm reading people all the time. Like, it doesn't mean I'm like every person I meet, oh, this one, that's going to happen and that's going to happen. But I'm getting energies from everyone. But if I walked up to everybody, I'd be exhausted.
So
You know,
how do you handle that if something feels like a message that might be significant, but the person doesn't know you from Adam?
oh, you mean if I really had like such a strong hit and I felt like this person really does need to know and I don't know them?
Has that ever happened?
I'd have to really rack my brain. It probably has, but I can't say that it's happening out in grocery stores or on the sidewalk, but
Oh.
it's probably happening in the store that I worked at, customers that come in, or maybe a cafe that I frequent and I feel something about somebody that comes in. Often it's when I hear people talk about a story or an anecdote that's when I get a message. they might be telling me about someone they just dated, and I'm like, okay. You know, right away, I just sort of know what's, I can often, the clairvoyance is strong enough over the years. I usually can see the person and feel their personality and what's most likely to come up. But, one time, more innocent type of example, just happened actually a couple days ago. I was at a bookstore and I went upstairs to get a coffee, and this girl, she was on her computer and she got up to serve me and she just had the weirdest face. And I said, "You all right? You look like you're in a funk." And then she just unleashed, you know, all this stuff she was going through. And so sometimes it's just innocently reflecting people's mood versus giving a prediction of like, looks like you just got some strange email or somebody's like making you question. Like, I didn't go too deep in it. I just let her talk, you know, but I don't do that all the time, or I would never, you know, walk 10 feet, you know.
You do emphasize a lot that divination can be an important tool to your personal spiritual development, and how you can either go very deep or just be very superficial depending on what you put into it. But can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you would use divination for personal spiritual growth, and how you would deepen your use of divination?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple that I like to use as examples because I think they come up with people a lot. One of them is the numbers, numerology and numbers. So for whatever reason, again, this happened to me spontaneously, and I noticed it as a pattern in my early 20s as I was starting to do more of this stuff privately. I would start to see the sequences, the 111, the 222, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the clock, or they would show up all the time. I was like, what's going on? You know, am I going crazy? What is going on here? And I just learned for myself without studying it or looking it up, because there wasn't really a thing like 30 years ago to talk about it. I just thought, okay, there's the numbers again. I'm just gonna trust what I'm feeling at that moment. I'm gonna take it as a sign that I'm on, because sometimes there'd be periods where you're seeing it everywhere and then it disappears, and you're seeing it one off, 112. Okay, what's going on there? And then it would come back again. And I just sort of tried to notice it as a mirror of the energy. But over time, people that start to open up their abilities always tell me they start seeing the numbers. And so I can't explain it further than that, but I can tell you there's some sort of initiation happening or something when people start seeing the numbers everywhere. But the superficial way would be like, oh, well, like my I don't know, my dad was born on the 13th, so whenever there's a 13, that's my dad. Like, well, not necessarily. You know, that's sometimes it's like wanting to make it work. Or there's people that just, they see a number and they look up an angel book, and there's like every number means something in the angel book number. It's like, well, that means that. What's that mean? It's like, I can't tell you. It's got to be a personal connection for you to know, why does that number come to you now? What were you feeling? What were you thinking when it came? Is it a pattern? It's going to take time to realize that. It's not like one number flashes and eureka, it's telling me my whole life, you know? So again, like that, not to put anyone down, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Whereas if you start to see patterns and they come up in numbers, and they might not be angel numbers, like I was mentioning, it might be a personal number that comes up for you, whatever reason. You wake up every day and it's 426. Why am I waking up at 426 in the morning? I don't know. But you'll have to sort of sit with it and go, something's waking me up at this time. The angel book won't tell you, you know, maybe something significant happened to you at that time when you were a kid. It's really hard to say, but that's where it gets more personal, right? With your personal patterns. And the other one that I find is amazing. It seems superficial at the beginning, but if you stick with it, it goes quite deep. And again, this is First Nations practice more, but it's animal totems. And so often people get you know, most of us would have some sort of encounter with a bird or an animal that sort of struck us, right? Like it was either lingering too long, it paused, it was out of its normal routine, or you encountered something and it really made an impression. Sometimes even in dreams, you know, whenever I've looked to, you know, what those animals symbolically mean, it always gave me a lot of tools for what could I look for going on in my life? Why would this animal show up? And then if it's something that is showing up regularly, because sometimes they do, then you really have an opportunity to go deeper because you study the nature of that animal, and it can be very precise, like their mating habits can tell you something, what they eat, their diet can tell you something, their, you know, whether they're territorial or social, whether they're loners, whether how they select their mates, and there's so much deep information if an animal keeps showing up around you. And it's a relationship like anything else, going to take a while. There was one that came to me and it was in a particular apartment, and then it never came back again, but I was there for a few years. And within the first week of moving in, I heard something outside my screen door, and I opened the window, and there was a huge raccoon. Like, I swear to God, it seemed like 3 feet high, and it was at me. And my first instinct was to right back at her. I was sort of surprised, right, at where'd that come from? I don't do that, you know? So I had that to think about. That's interesting. What's that mean? That was my first instinct. And then after that, all these raccoons they'd wait till my lights were on, and then they'd come out of the woods, and some of them came in the daytime. That's already symbolic because they're nocturnal. One year a mama and baby came, and they would just stay at my threshold. They'd let me feed them. They never came in the door. And others were just like, you know, you got anything for me kind of thing. And I studied them for a while because it was a few years of this, and I realized, you know, when it comes to let's say a lion or a bear or something, you're not going to make eye contact. That's hostile. They're going to attack. And when it comes to our dogs and cats, if we make eye contact, usually it's like they trust us. But the raccoon, it's just like, did you see me? Do you see me now? You know, they are not scared of you, and they are not bonding with you. And that was weird. And then that's why they get this reputation of being the tricksters. You know? And so I found that very interesting. And even to this day, I still go, I can see now in hindsight with who was around me. I had trickster energy around me at that time, but I didn't see it right away. So that's where it just really keeps revealing itself over time. It's pretty amazing.
You also talked about asking questions in your divination about rather than just asking questions about, you know, does so-and-so like me or whatever, asking questions about your spiritual path that could take you deeper. I thought that was interesting because most of the time, I think most of us use divination more like, you know, does he love me? It's like,
yeah, will he call me? Yeah.
Will I get that job? Or
exactly.
That kind of thing. That was an interesting idea to use it as a tool in your spiritual growth that way.
Yeah, I mean, someone came to me years ago, and I was sort of impressed. She asked me, instead of channeling people around her or asking me future questions, she said, I want to know what my higher self wants to say to me. I'm like, wow. And framing it in that way gave an amazing reading. You know, so I think divination can be like, there's so many ways, right, that to sort of ask about your spiritual path, but certainly asking your higher self, and you could do that in a meditation. You could do that with scrying, like with a mirror. You could do that with your crystal ball. You could do that with a candle flame, and you can meditate and ask that your higher self speak through you, and use your pen, write it down, or see what comes to you. Or you could also, since I'm an astrologer, astrology is an amazing tool for that kind of stuff, because the chart is like an onion that'll always give you another layer in this life. And so there are definitely things in the chart that would show it's not really phrased as spiritual path. It's more like your karma in this life, which would be like the north and the south nodes of the moon. And your south node is said to be your past life direction and where you default now. If you're when you're scared and insecure, like a lot of us are right now, you're going to default back into whatever that is. So whereas the one that you're going towards is going to feel very awkward, but that's where the more you embody that, the more you're going to be on path and your destiny unfolds and things flow. So that can be very telling, and it's like, it's not easy work to do that. My south node is in Virgo, so that would have said many lives, either a monastic or teacher, doctor, perfectionist, organizing everything. And I used to make crazy, stupid lists. Like the perfectionism is, and having teachers for parents, just like over the moon. And my north node's supposed to be Pisces. I'm supposed to just be the lighthouse, like just worry about my own connection and not worry about the planning everything, and not worry, and being a little more go with the flow means you're not perfection. And so every time I do that, I feel strange because I grew up with the other, right? But life does go better the more, the less, the more I let go of that. So that's one really strong way I think divination informs your spiritual path. But you can ask it anything. I believe divination, you can ask anything. You get good answers from good questions.
You also talked about seeing the work as sacred and treating the tools of the work as sacred. So how do you treat your tools, your divination tools? How do you treat them as sacred?
Yeah, well, one way would be, you set the tone and you set the space to do it. So on a basic level, you want to have a room or an area that's private and you're not going to be interrupted. You want it, comfortable, warm, well lit, private, like, to create the space to feel safe for whatever comes up. Some of us are going to, light a candle or burn the sage or incense or something to cleanse. Some of us are going to do opening meditations, like we do at ARE. And those things, just ritual is very important, to bring you into a certain deeper space where you can receive or hear or explore things that it just doesn't happen when you have all that noise and distraction, or if there's someone around who thinks it's a joke or so. Yeah, like you have to take it seriously. And then your tools, well, that could be anything. I've got gems all around me, so they're always surrounding me to be sort of my sacred space, even though you can't see it on my desk. My cards go in a special bag that I sewed, and I have some special things in there. Some people, there's a lot of superstitions as well about how to keep your tools, but I think it just matters that you do treat them as special. I don't think that we have enough of that in society anymore, do we?
No, I thought about that because I read a book by a woman who was a curandera, Mexican healer, spiritual healer, and as well as herbs and so forth. And she would smudge every one of her tools, everything she used.
Yes.
She would smudge it on a regular basis. And I was thinking, what would it be like if in a hospital they were? I mean, they do cleanse things in a different kind of way. They cleanse things on a physical level, to make them sterile. But what would it be like if they were doing this spiritual cleansing of like every machine and every tool and every room and every,
Exactly.
all every day? How would
Yes.
that change?
I know, because we all like, well, mainstream doesn't believe we pick up and manifest energy, but we do. And even when I'd go in for a blood test in the hospital, sometimes I start crying or have panic. It's like, I'm not, that's not mine. You know, I'm just here for a blood test. But it reminds me, actually, I had a client who was a funeral home director who was quite enlightened. And one of his employees used to come to me as well. He was a Reiki master, but he worked at the funeral home. They brought me in about twice a year to cleanse the space. And they did it when they and their staff started sensing things or seeing things, or they just could feel a sense of stagnation or weird things were happening. And so that was quite enlightening to go into that kind of environment, because some rooms were just basically reserved for different cultures who used them mainly. There was one that was mainly for Asian funerals and one mainly for Italian. I got to go into the crematorium, and of course I just saw orbs everywhere. They let me into the room to see, you know, the people that were ready to go in their caskets, and that was fascinating to me as well, because some you could feel the spirit was gone a long time ago. Others looked like they could sit up and say something still. And that was just really fascinating. But yeah, I would go in there with my tools, meaning I would bring sage or sometimes rosemary because it's stronger if something won't leave. And I would also bring my sound healing. So it's a 528 hertz chime, solfeggio chime for the love vibration. And between those two things, my visualization and my talking and asking whatever it was to go to the light, or dialoguing, and they all said they just felt, oh, just calm. There's nobody peeking out at the closet anymore or whatever have you. And yeah, I wish more people would do this in these environments. Like, yeah, everywhere we go, we absorb things, you know, every apartment we live in, you know, people came before us, even if they are still alive now. There's an imprint of energy everywhere. And yeah, a lot of these tools and practices can help us clear it.
We're not going to have time to talk about all of the 100
Yeah.
fortune telling, but are there a few others that you think are important that you'd like to talk about, share?
Yeah, sure. One that I did recently that was really great and is accessible to anybody is tea leaf reading. And of course, it's an ancient practice. I'm not sure whether the tea leaf predates the coffee, but I think they might have read coffee grounds before tea leaves. But it was really popular with the Victorian times to do the tea leaf readings. And so I gathered some people, and about 6 of us, and we talked around the circle, and then we drank our tea and let it settle, and rotate your cup and let the leaves settle, and then everybody went around, and it was fascinating how we all saw, even if there was variations on an animal, we saw something within the same ballpark, or people could tap into how something related to another thing, and it was uncanny. It was really interesting as an intuitive exercise. And it was sort of fascinating too. So it seemed like we wanted to just keep going and going with it. So that's a very accessible one to try. And another one that's great that's accessible is bibliomancy. So if you just pick the first book that's next to you off the shelf, or you go through the bookstore and you see what's calling to you, think about what's on your mind. You know, should I move? I don't know. Should I sell my house? You don't have to be in the housing section. You could be in the magazine section, but you just go, which thing is just calling me as I think of that question? And then you can just randomly flip the book open and point to a line, and that's your message. Or you might hear a number, pick up the book, here 125, line 4. Okay, well, go see what that is and see if that's a message. And it's a really fun one. And again, depends what book you choose and what you're asking. But, you know, that people have been doing that since the Iliad and the Odyssey. They would come to see the book and open it and see what their fate might say. So, yeah. Pendulums is another, pendulums and gems. See what you're drawn to, gemstone wise. I believe more in like, because I write about intuition, I believe more in like, instead of calculating it and reading a book and, oh, I need a lapis lazuli, like, okay, well, but maybe you don't feel it when you're in the store. Maybe you're drawn to something else as you hold it. Might surprise you, that you need it. Some stones, they're just pretty and we're attracted to them, and others really call us, and you do feel something holding it or wearing it as jewelry. And I've had some freaky stories of those things too. There's I was really drawn to turquoise maybe about 15, 20 years ago, which I believe had something to do with like martyr complexes and stuff like that. That was part of it. It was a throat chakra one, but it dealt with sacrifices and stuff. And I just didn't care. I loved the turquoise. And then one day I didn't do anything. And I woke up and literally my pendant was like mashed, or it was like I took it with a hammer or something. I don't know how what happened. It was freaky, but I've seen lots of freaky things in this line of work. And I'm like, okay. Had to ask myself, am I done with this stone? Like, have I learned its lesson? And I've gone through phases like that with colors or with stones. Even colors can still tell you a lot. And that's a very simple one. Is there a color you're drawn to? Wear it. See what it does for you. Yeah. There's so many. I mean, it's so vast. That's why it's a lot of fun. But it's also like, I just always want to get across to people, like, these things are ancient. There's divination is in every indigenous culture and evolved and was either condoned or not condoned by religion or morphed into other things. But I think that's why it still speaks to us on some level.
What are your thoughts about Ouija boards?
I don't like them. I've seen just too many people. I never used it, but I've met a lot of people who told me horrible stories of feeling visited by lower entities that they couldn't get rid of for sometimes years. A lot of people think it's a game. I don't think it's a game.
Well, that's why I brought it up, is because a lot of times it's something people sort of do for entertainment.
Yeah.
They're like half serious and half,
Yeah.
making fun of it while they do it, which is more or less what you were saying not to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably people that can do that and they might get something that freaks them out and they can just tune it out and still live their lives. Maybe there's something around their house or not, but it sort of seems to attract, like, to me, over the years, like, spirits that are in the light or that we want to be listening to would never push an object around, and they would never tell you what to do, and they would never say anything negative. And the experiences people seem to have with Ouija is very directive and invasive. And that's why I believe it attracts something lower. So yeah, is it real? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to be in communion with it? Probably not. And some people felt very disturbed and they couldn't get rid of it. They felt something was then attached and following them. And then they didn't have, they were 15, they didn't have anyone to talk to or any skill set to understand or relieve it. And at that age, you're fragile. People can, diagnose you with something, medicate you. And to me, you just don't want to play with that kind of fire.
Right. It is something teenagers often get involved with. And,
Yeah.
Tracy readings more or less warned, they didn't exactly say lower entities, but they kind of warned against the Ouija board too, about the fact that it could connect you up with things you didn't want to be connected with.
Okay, that's good to validate that then. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever tried?
Yes, when I was younger, sure, I did. Yeah, but nothing, I don't remember. Well, it was exactly that sort of teenage, half, half serious, half playing, sort of
Yeah.
titillating, but nothing much really came through, which is probably just as well as good.
Yeah. Yes. Well,
So,
there are lots of things people can do if they've had that experience, or if they feel something's around them. But that really took me a while to learn that stuff as well. It's pretty scary if there's things around you or if you're hearing you know, directive, or like you feel like something's in the room or touching you while you sleep, or I've heard all kinds of crazy stories. It's terrifying. People can really be like mentally disrupted from doing that. I think people have to go really slowly with this stuff instead of like just unzip, themselves too quickly.
and use some sort of prayer of protection or something before engaging in some of these.
Yeah, well, and that's another part of the whole ritual and sacred space part of it, is like usually having a sacred space or taking it seriously means you're only going to do it in a certain environment, and you say prayer, or you visualize light, or you have some tools around or something that will help protect a bit from something lower coming up. Yeah.
Do you have other favorite tips from the book?
Let me just randomly look at something here. Oh yes, palmistry. That's another huge topic there. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in the palmistry. I never learned it. I learned a little bit of it, and then I realized like this was a major study to undertake, and you'd have to look at hundreds and hundreds of people's hands, and you could see like a portrait of the whole life before you, versus like tarot gives you a little bit of a window. Astrology gives you sort of a philosophical context for stuff, but the hand is like, oh, somebody read mine as like, oh, when you're I don't know, he said maybe when you're in your 60s, you're gonna have some sort of near-death experience. And like, okay, did I need to know that at 22? Like, so I just sort of shied away because it was really powerful, and you have to be able to cope with whatever messages you're gonna get. Or if someone tells you your health, or whether you'll marry or never have children, or who knows what they're gonna tell you in your hand. It's harder to do that with some of the other tools. It's but it is fascinating. Let's see.
So palm reading might be one where the choice of words would be important
Yes.
in particular.
Yes. Oh yeah, this one's interesting too. Oh, looks like our time's gone. There's the dowsing, which is a very interesting thing. It's sort of close to pendulums and energy work, right? But there's still dowsing communities, to the best of my knowledge, looking for underwater, wells and tributaries, and you have to read the energy and read the way the rods move. A shaman taught me a little bit, so I started to learn a little bit, and it was really fascinating. I'd like to learn more about that. I mean, and I don't even know how far back that goes, but it's an interesting practice to try as well. Just feeling the land and the ley lines and stuff like that. Fascinating.
So you also have a radio program, that's correct?
I had a radio show for a few years, and I still have some episodes you can hear. If you go to Anchor or probably on Spotify, the River Rain Show, there's still going to be shows up to listen to, but I sort of stopped it midway through the pandemic and had to think about whether I want to revive it. We've been in a weird sort of funk, and the polarization is real, so I wasn't sure how much I wanted to be on the live show. I miss it, but yeah.
What is the River Rain all about? Because your show was the River Rain Show, and your website is River Rain, and your email is River Rain. Is there a
Yes.
story behind that?
Oh yes. So in a nutshell, I went back to do community economic development studies at a university, and we were all like a room full of activists, and all we did for a year was was talk about community and change. And the river to me is the flow that we're all in, whether we like it or not. And the rain is the drops of the individuals and how we all intersect on the river of life. And so I have a video that explains it in more detail than that on my website if people want to watch it. Yeah, to me, it's a deep metaphor for how change works in the world.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Do you have plans now for another book? You've done 3.
Yes, I'm in the midst of writing another pitch for a tarot book, and it'll be a comparative tarot, and I'm going to bring in not just Rider-Waite and Crowley, but also a bit of how Joseph Campbell might have framed the tarot, or how Jung might have framed the tarot, or modern psychology might have framed the tarot. Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm also a bit nervous because I'm writing something really chunky. Yeah, it's going to be more like a book of essays on certain cards versus like an itemized book. It's more philosophical this time and academic. So yeah, I'm excited and terrified at the same time. And it's for Llewellyn this time instead of Sterling Ethos. So whole new experience.
Well, I think of them as a good publisher.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
but I
go
pitch
ahead.
things all the time for the other one. So we're just sort of waiting on an astrology book to see if that's going to fly, or possibly a psychic development series book, which I'm hoping. Yeah.
And if people want a reading with you, a psychic reading, or a mediumship session, or to do a divination, what should they do?
So yeah, you can go to my website, river-rain.com, or you can find me on social media or YouTube. So Catharine Allan, or you can type in River Rain, I'm sure, and Medium, and I'm going to come up because it's, yeah, multiple platforms, Instagram, whatever. And I can do it on Zoom and record it. And I look forward to meeting people.
Great. Well, this has
Yeah.
been fun. And
Yeah, it has. Thank you.
thank you for joining me. And if people want to reach me, they can reach me through the ARE of New York at info@edgarcaycenyc.org, and I'll spell that. It's INFO, the little @ symbol, EDGARCAYCENYC.org. So thank you so much for joining me and having this talk. It's been really interesting, and I appreciate your coming on and being my guest.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, Lynn. So it's been a great night.
Thank you both for a wonderful show. I wish you great success with all your writing projects.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening.
You
You
too.
too.
Good night.
Good night.